Okay, well, hey everyone, thank you so much for coming to our third workshop on presentation skills / slide making today. We're so pleased to see everyone here today, and hopefully a couple more stream through in the next couple of minutes. So my name's Jess, and I'm one of the co-directors of UCCC this year. And today on this call, we also have Charles and Minji, our two lovely logistics officers. So any questions you guys have about anything, please don't hesitate to shoot out a message in the chat. But otherwise, I will now pass it to Minji to do a quick acknowledgement of country.
Yeah, thanks, Jess. So before we start, we would like to acknowledge that today we are dialing in from the lands of the Wurundjeri people who have been custodians of this land for thousands of years. We would like to acknowledge and pay our respects to their elders, past, present, and emerging, and extend this respect to everyone who may be dialing in from different countries. I invite you all to use the chat function to write a quick acknowledgement of country of your own.
As you probably already know, UCCC is an initiative of the Young Australian Cancer Initiative. We are a student-led not-for-profit organization that aims to nurture a future generation of cancer-literate individuals who are empowered with the skills and knowledge to reduce the cancer burden in our society. The UCCC aims to provide an opportunity for university students across Australia to get together in groups of 2 to 4 to tackle a real issue in the cancer space. This year, the case challenge is to design an intervention to increase HPV vaccination 2-dose course completion rates among First Nation adolescents.
A lot of you may know the submission deadline for your preliminary deliverables, which includes a maximum 50-slide deck and a 500-word overview report, is the deadline for that is coming up next Sunday. So on that note, it's my pleasure today to introduce our workshop facilitators, so Hasini, Joe, and Cherry, our lovely friends from 180 Degrees Consulting, who are here today to show you guys how to make the biggest impact in your preliminary deliverable. So without further ado, I'll let you guys take it away.
Thanks, Jess. And just to confirm, everyone can see my screen, which is sharing a big Among Us poster. Awesome. Thanks everyone for coming along. So I'm Cherry, and today I'm joined by Haz and Joe, and we're going to be taking you through a short workshop on slide making. So in particular, how to design and format and present your information into a very aesthetically pleasing and coherent slide format, and hopefully some of the skills and kind of areas we touch on today you'll be able to bring into your own case competition slides and presentation. And for this workshop we've chosen a very fun Among Us theme, so hopefully this provides a bit more engagement. And if anyone likes Among Us, me, Joe, and maybe Haz are pretty keen Among Us players. I know Jess is keen sometimes, so feel free to hit us up with Among Us banter as well. So to kick off, I just wanted to introduce the kind of areas we wanted to touch on today. So we have an executive summary here. This will basically sum up all of our material and hopefully give an insight on the things that we're going to talk about. So we have a situation, complication, and question framework just to present our kind of context up front. So the situation today is the UCCC teams have the case competition deadlines coming up, and we all want to help you guys deliver engaging slide decks for the judges and audience. So the complication we're hoping to resolve is slide making. So slide making is a skill that isn't really taught at university formally, and it's probably one of the skills where you can't really master it just like from the know-how by yourself. You kind of need some exposure and practice to it. So the type of slides we are presenting today are your typical consulting or case competition type slides. So these slides are quite different from the type of slides you might get from your academic professor, because we're more using this to tell a compelling story and persuade judges or persuade a client to do something rather than just presenting information for knowledge sharing. So the question we're going to answer today is, how can UCCC teams be better equipped with the skills and knowledge to create engaging, effective, and aesthetically pleasing slides for their presentations? So hopefully the outcome of this will be you guys being able to have the confidence and the skills to up your slide making skills for the competition. In today's workshop, we're going to go through 3 key areas. One will be content and structure, design, as well as key considerations. And each of us will be talking through one of these areas. And if you have questions along the way, feel free to pop that in the chat. So we'll monitor that as well and kind of answer that when needed. And before we begin, we think it'd be good for us to introduce ourselves a bit more and get to know each other a bit. So maybe I'll kick off first and then we'll just go through. So I'm Cherry and I did a Bachelor of Commerce at Melbourne Uni and I graduated at the end of last year. So currently I'm an associate at SPP, which is a boutique management consulting firm in Melbourne. And last year I had the great pleasure of being part of 180 Degrees Consulting with Joe and Haas. That's how I met them and that's how we're still staying strong friends today.
Awesome, thank you, Ches. So, hey guys, pleasure to meet you all. I'm Jo and am currently still doing my Bachelor's of Commerce alongside with a Diploma in Languages. And I guess my day job currently is I'm an intern at the University of Melbourne doing marketing and comms. And finally, I'm coming from an events director capacity from 180 Degrees Consulting. But before that, I did a few consulting projects as a consultant and as a team leader. Yeah, that's it from me. I pass on to Haas.
So much, Jo. Hey everyone, it's awesome to be here. I'm Haas. I'm currently studying a Master of Management, but I've got a Bachelor's in Pharmacy as well. I'm currently interning at CSIRO and am the People and Culture Director at 180 Degrees as well. Just like Ches and Jo, we've all been consultants and team leaders at the organisation too. So I'll hand back to Ches and we'll get cracking.
Yeah, thanks Jo and Haas. So our first topic for discussion will be content and structure. So this is basically how to structure your slides logically and also what kind of content you should be putting in your slide. So to kick off, we just like to begin with saying the most important thing is that the content of your slides should be directly related to the case comp problem and answering the key question from the case competition. So in a slide for a case comp or consulting style type, we have 4 basic components. You have the title, subheadings, evidence and explanation, and a source. And we'll go through each of these. And along the way, we also have the running Among Us example. So hopefully you guys can see how some of the points we're talking about is reflected in that as well. So firstly, the title is essentially the key takeaway or a one message statement that you want the audience to take away from your slide overall. So it should kind of summarize the most important message of your slide. And if it's the one thing that the audience is able to read or is able to see, it should be your title. So the title is the most important. Next, we have the subheadings. So subheadings are useful for just kind of breaking up your slide if you have multiple bits of information. And it also helps to kind of guide the audience into what type of information they're seeing without bombarding them all at once with different formats or different types of info at once. And next we have the evidence and explanation. So this is where you would present the bulk of your information and basically all of your findings that you've found from your research. So this should be directly kind of supporting and following on from your title. And it's essentially all of the statistics or the evidence or the logical reasoning that should back up the answer. And finally, we have the source. So the source is basically where you got your information from. And this is particularly useful if you're asked the question by judges, how did you get to this number? Where did you get this research from? You can quickly refer to your source and kind of show everyone that it's reliable and reputable. So through the example on the right, we can see that we have kind of a key case question, which is who is the imposter? And if you guys haven't played Among Us before, basically it's a game where there's an imposter that goes around killing people, but no one knows who the imposter is, and you have to figure out who it is as part of the game. So to answer this question, we have our title, which says green is likely to be the imposter among us. So this is directly relevant to answering the case question, and it's kind of the one key message we want the audience to take away. Next, we have our kind of subheadings and explanations where we say green has not been doing tasks, and green did not report the body despite standing over it. So this is the evidence that supports and backs up our title. And finally, we have our key sources at the bottom. And moving on, we're going to be reiterating a lot the importance of titles. So the title should clearly state the key takeaway of your slide, and it should be a standalone statement. So here we have kind of examples of ineffective titles versus effective titles. So I want to be clear that the kind of two key things you should be making sure your titles are is that one, they should obviously be directly relevant and related to answering the key question, and two, your title should be as punchy and impactful and straight to the point as possible. So always keep those two things in mind when you're kind of creating your slide titles. So an example here on the left is, after studying all possible areas, we found that Scrum methodology provided the most benefits. So this kind of is relevant to whatever question they're trying to answer, except it is a bit wordy and it could be more succinctly communicated. And in the effective version, we have Scrum methodologies could save around 20% of human resource costs. So this gets straight to the point. We're able to see kind of a punchy statistic, and we're able to see kind of where the benefit is rather than just stating there is a benefit. Second example, most employees have reported that the new parental leave policy is a great initiative. This title, I think it does convey kind of the key answer that we want, except again, it can be kind of more succinctly communicated with the use of statistics or kind of shortened down to take out all of the unnecessary filler words. Third example, research shows that the company's financial situation needs to be improved. So this title here, it doesn't really tell us the answer to the question, and this is assuming the question is something around how can the company's financial situation be improved. So a better version of this would be, the product bundling initiative will increase revenue by 12%. So this more effective title basically tells us in one sentence exactly how the financial situation can be improved, and hence it kind of just like directly answers the question. Finally, we have outlined 3 key pillars to our recruitment strategy. So this is quite short, and it succinctly kind of answers, is related to the key question or like the problem, except it doesn't really tell us what the 3 key pillars are. It kind of just says, this is how we are kind of finding the answer. A more effective way to do this would just be to really impactfully like list out the 2 or 3 key findings that you've used to kind of answer or directly communicate the key message and answer the case question. So in the effective title here, we have the new recruitment strategy focuses on candidate experience, gamification, and digital transformation. So at once we kind of get all the 3 answers that we want, and this is just more impactful, and it communicates kind of directly the most relevant information for the audience. So summary of this is that the title is very important, and it should kind of be the one standalone thing that the audience takes away, and it should have the most punchy and impactful information. So if we zoom out a bit, we also need to take into account the power of titles, not just standalone, but working together with the full kind of flow of the slide presentation. So in your kind of day-to-day uni life, in your lectures, you might see your lecturers using descriptive titles, which is when they simply state what is on the slide. So the examples here are historical employee data, recent HR changes, HR cost forecast, levers to improve retention, recommendation. So it's clear what's going to be on the slide, but it doesn't really tell us a narrative or a compelling story. And the point of the case competition is to tell a story to persuade your judges or your clients to do an action. So on the right here, we have link titles. So link titles are basically a better way to ensure you're telling a narrative, and it's just more impactful to the audience when they can kind of see the logical flow from slide to slide. So the examples we have here are employee attrition rates have increased by around 25%. The number of graduate applicants per cycle has increased. New recruitment costs are expected to increase by around 10%. Greater employee benefits could improve retention by around 15%. And the next step is that leadership must align on the implementation plan. So this is a lot of information at once, but each slide tells us the kind of key info we want, and all of that together kind of creates a story and links us to kind of the final recommendation. So when you're thinking about creating titles and slides for your case competition, I would recommend just reading through the titles alone. So going through each title one by one and ensuring that it's logical and that they kind of build up to a recommendation or kind of a conclusion that you're saying towards the end. So hopefully that's long enough of me ranting about titles. And if anyone has any questions, please put that in the chat. And without further ado, I'll pass it on to Hasini.
Thank you so much, Tess. You did not harp on, don't worry. Titles are very, very important, and I think they're underrated. So no, I think we purposefully talked about it for a long time. Okay, moving on now to diagrams and infographics. So following on from Chez's recommendations just about content and structure, it's also a good idea to consider substituting like a large body of text with a diagram or an infographic, because they do sort of provide a much clearer visualization of a complex idea or concept as well. And I'm sure you've all found that completing research, particularly for a case competition, can involve a lot of convoluted, confusing complexities, but eventually you do need to be able to get the most important message and elements of your work across to your audience and the judges as well. And so when you use a graphic or a diagram, it's sometimes really easy to see what you're trying to say, and there can be as well several advantages as opposed to using just text, 4 of which I have listed on the left of this slide here. So firstly, of course, visuals are more engaging and attention grabbing when you see them. You know, they keep your eyes on them. Secondly, they can be more memorable and impactful. Of course, if I were to see sort of a paragraph of text, I'm pretty sure I'd remember, you know, the little brain icon in comparison. Moving on now, they can sometimes be emotionally charged, particularly, you know, with a case competition that's related to mental health or, you know, health in general, it can be emotionally charged. And lastly, they're very simple and clear. Instead of me sort of having to read multiple sentences over and over to kind of understand what's going on, a picture can tell 1,000 words, if you will. So if we move now to the right of the slide, we can see here an example of an infographic. At the top, it says here, key characteristics of an Among Us expert. Straight away, I know, okay, you know, I'm going to get some information about what the characteristics are that make an Among Us expert. And then as we move down, we can see that the little circles sort of appear on a spectrum of different characteristics, and these map to create sort of an overall picture of what this expert looks like. Now, instead of, you know, listing out these characteristics, we've provided them on a spectrum, which gives us the indication that, you know, depending on where you put that red dot, those characteristics can change, and that will affect whether or not this individual or person is an Among Us expert. And then to add sort of another depth of complexity, I would say, to this graph is the priority sort of metric on the rightmost portion of that slide there, which tells us a bit more information. It tells us that those characteristics are positioned sort of in a hierarchy, and as you move down, they get less and less important. So few different things here that are very clearly articulated in a picture, as opposed to, you know, how many words I would have to use to describe that in text. Wonderful. Let's move on to the next slide. Okay, so charts and graphs are also a very fantastic way to illustrate different relationships. They should really clearly summarize the interaction between key elements and be really easy to interpret. So we've got a few different examples on the slides here, but I would say think critically about the appropriateness of a chart and whatever you do choose to represent a relationship, because if the graph is sort of difficult to interpret, or if it confuses your audience and doesn't quite get the right message across, then it shouldn't really be there. So think about what you want to show. If it is better in sort of a couple of dot points, then do that. Otherwise, if the graph does provide, you know, a more effective depiction of the relationship, then use that instead. Wonderful. I'm going to hand back to Jo now, who'll talk a little bit about design elements for slide making.
Thank you so much, Hans. So yes, within design, we'll be mainly focused on how to compose the contents of your slide. So just from our personal experience, we think these 5 pillars really hone in on what you should definitely keep in mind for how you lay out your deck. So the first is alignment. Basically, this is just about making sure that things are centered or aligned towards the left, right, or center, along with making sure your elements are equally spaced out. The next is color. We recommend to not go over 2 or 3 colors in your designs or slides. But if you do end up going over, 5 is probably the max. A tip from us is whenever we do our slide decks for our clients, we try to incorporate some of their logo / organizational colors. So maybe this is something you could possibly consider for when constructing your own slides. And then for the font, try to keep it one font. And we reckon sans serif, so that just basically means fonts without the tails, like Arial, is the best. And definitely within individual slides you focus on, keep your subheadings the same size and paragraphs the same size. And of course, the title the same size throughout the entire deck. That would just make it look a lot more clean and professional. And then next, with scale and hierarchy, make sure your important bits within your slides, of course, are big in size and have additional information that aren't the focus, a relatively smaller size. And finally, we have the white space. We would say embrace it, have it in your slides, because it's just a lot easier to follow the slide content and makes things, again, look tidier and a lot more professional. But also it indirectly shows that you know how to summarize your findings as well. So moving on to the next slide, I guess now that we kind of talked about what to do, the slide basically shows you what not to do. So in Australia, we read from top down, left, right. And this means that for the slides that you make, it's quite important that you follow this direction when laying out your findings. So just to kind of emphasize the importance of this hierarchy, as we can see in the slide, if it really weren't for the arrows and numbers as signposts of where I should be reading, I would naturally kind of read, you know, in the top down, left, right manner, but then nothing would make sense. So yes, definitely make sure you follow the top down, left, right hierarchy when you're presenting your findings and recommendations. So as a little activity during our presentation, we made a slide that we would regard as quite badly composed. I guess from everyone's point of view, what would some of your critiques be about the slide? If you can kind of type in the chat about what your thoughts are, that would be great. And then we can have a look at what exactly went wrong with these slides. Yeah, 100% different font sizes. And yes, a lot of text is involved with the slide. I'm sure you can read some of the small texts down the bottom. Yeah, uneven dots around numbers. The shapes are slightly different, and there's definitely an inconsistent numbering / lettering system. Yes, it is not visually pleasing at all. Awesome. I think everyone has a pretty good idea of what makes the slide bad. So if we move on to the next slide, like it kind of breaks down, I guess, what is wrong with the slide. So as somebody have suggested, there's inconsistent numbering, and then, you know, there's inconsistent formatting and size of fonts. And then basically, you know, there's no hierarchy within the slide. I'm not sure what I'm meant to focus on, to be honest. And I guess one thing to point out as well, that there's also uneven white space. So as you can see, like all the information is just not aligned. You don't really know where to look first and whatnot. So if we move on to the next slide, I guess awesome. So we have an example of a better composition. So what would you guys say would be better about the slide compared to the previous one? If you can once again use the chat to kind of give your thoughts, that'd be great. No takers? No? Awesome. Yes, boxes are aligned. Nice color contrast. Yep. I guess like with colors as well, it kind of helps you in terms of determining that hierarchy as well. Yep. Like you said, Annabelle, there's a hierarchy structure to the slide. No, awesome. These are all really good points. I think we might move on from there, but thank you guys for your participation. I might just pass it back to Haas to kind of wrap it up with key considerations.
Thank you so much, Jo. Awesome. I guess to conclude tonight's session, we'd like to leave you with a few guiding principles that sort of further outline just why it is so important to ensure that your slide making skills and your slide decks are up to scratch. Firstly, it really does optimize engagement. When your view is clean and structured, your presentation is lent further credibility, and you know, your judges and your audience members, they sort of believe in your messaging, especially when you've got something that's really nicely structured and very clean. For our next point, statistically speaking, 65% of the population are visual learners. So if you sort of tap into this segment and reinforce the visual elements of your slides, this can really ensure that your content is digestible, memorable, engaging, and just all around, I guess, appealing to the eye. Lastly, your slides are really the backbone for telling a compelling story, and framing an important message accurately, I think, is crucial for success, particularly in your final presentations. So ensure that you do use your slides to make this happen. So if we move to the right of the slide now, we've sort of summarized a few final tips and takeaways from tonight's session. If there's anything you walk away from, these should sort of be those key elements. So firstly, title. Title. It is very important. It's what makes the deck insightful or confusing. So make sure everything is connected to tell a story. It is a statement that summarizes everything and provides the key takeaway for your page. Less is more. So don't overcrowd your slides and be really sort of strategic in what you do decide to put on there. Thirdly, do use frameworks with consideration. Like I said, think about whether or not it'll really marry up with the messaging that you'd like to portray there, and it should really fit with the content that you want to communicate. And lastly, have fun with it. Case competitions are always really fun, and regardless of the final outcome, it's important that you take it as a learning experience, and you just enjoy yourselves, and I guess, yeah, enjoy the ride. That is all. If we move on to the next slide here, we've kind of collated a checklist of items that you can follow just to ensure that slides are professional, engaging, and highly structured. So when you do endeavour to create those slides, use this checklist, and we will socialise this pack with you as well. So follow along with our guidelines here for content, structure, and design.
And we promise this will form the framework of your slides, but then of course build on these ideas and concepts as well. Okay, so moving on now to the fun part of tonight, just to get a bit of engagement up and to break the monotony of the three of us talking at you. We've got a very fun activity planned. So very shortly, one of my colleagues are going to paste in a link into the chat. So go to this link, it'll take you to a Google slide. I want you to download this slide and save a copy of it. And the activity basically is to make it live. Try and fix it based on the information that we have provided for you tonight. And after approximately 15 minutes, we'll come back and we'll allow maybe one or two groups to present to get some feedback from the three of us and as well to get a little roasted. So we'll put you into just randomly assigned breakout rooms. And again, you're not going to get marked on this. This is just for fun. So if you like, download it, keep it still on Google Slides so that all of you in the breakout room can collaborate together. But if we move on now to the next slide, we'll give you a sneak peek of what it looks like. It is quite hideous. It breaks all of the rules that we've talked about today. And I think Joe and Ches and I had the most fun making this because it's just gross. So what we'll do is we'll get our wonderful logistics managers to put us all into rooms. And if you're keen, please have a go, and then we'll bring you all back to the main room and we'll have a chat. This was probably a tricky task to try and get done in 15 minutes because it is quite an awful slide. But I guess what we were going to maybe do is just to conclude today as well was just to reiterate what really is wrong with this slide and what could really make it a lot better. So I might start off with a few things and then maybe Ches, Joe, you guys can chime in with a few things that are wrong as well. Firstly, when I start at the top, there's no title, and we know that the title should provide the key takeaway, summarize everything that's on the slide. There is a little sort of highlighted box there in red that says the crew member's guide to survival. And having read all of those little squares, I know that these sort of bits of text do tell me what, they provide some advice as to how you can survive in this game. So the title should clearly articulate that, I think, and summarize that for the audience. Joe, anything else that you think is wrong with the slide?
Yeah, I mean, I think you've kind of mentioned one really hard, but I think from my end, one thing that I would definitely try to avoid in any slides is like the overcrowding of text, because at the moment it's quite difficult to read exactly what's going on and what the key takeaway here is. It's taking me way longer than needed to kind of find what's the information I'm looking at here. Yeah. I think that's it really for me, but also just the images. I think that's quite obvious. How about you, Cherry?
I think what I look forward to in a slide is good use of space. So it's kind of good to have like a white border around the side where like nothing is there, just so it looks cleaner. So in terms of this, I would try to keep kind of like these edges and stuff clear and have everything aligned to the left and probably like flowing downwards, short, succinct, like 5 things. Or you could like have an image on the left and then you're like 5 things on the right. Or you could have like, as Joe did earlier, I think it was kind of like 5 vertical chunks along the page. So think about spacing and how you can like optimize use of space in the best way possible. Yeah, that's from me.
Awesome. I think that's probably all of our advice. I think our pointing out what was wrong with the slide also tells you what you can do right. And Ches as well gave some ideas for you as to how you can really create a better slide from the content that we see today. I guess just to wrap up, it was wonderful to present to you guys today. Hopefully you did get something out of the session, and to my understanding, Jess will socialize this pack with you shortly. So please feel free to use the advice, especially the checklist as well that we've provided at the end of the pack as well. But again, thank you so much. I might hand over to Jess if you do have any closing comments as well for tonight.
All right, thank you so much, Joe and Cherry, for your knowledge and insight. If anyone has questions that would like to ask, please feel free to unmute, or you want to send you a question in the chat. Feel free to do it now.
Yeah, I had a question. Does anybody have any kind of tips on titling your actual presentation? Like, not like, I know we went over the slide pretty rigorously and how you should title each slide in your story, but like, how do you give your story a name?
How do you give your story a name? Do you mean the overall presentation?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, if I'm interpreting this correctly, you sort of mean just the title page of your entire pack?
Yeah, the actual like title of the presentation.
Oh, okay. I think that's probably a separate title to the headline of each of your pages. So if we like, just to refer back to sort of our title slide, it just had a huge Among Us theme, and then it said slide making workshop. So it can be as clear as that, because you don't really spend a lot of time on your first page, which sort of welcomes your presentation. So don't worry too much about that. And then with the executive summary as well, I think it's okay for you to just say executive summary. And then when your pack begins, that's when you need to really, I think critically about what your headlines should be. So don't worry too much about the title of the entire presentation, but the headlines of your pages after your executive summary should then tell the story, because that's where it sort of begins, right? The summary, the executive summary is just sort of a high-level overview of what you're going to talk about, and then you begin to sort of tell the story from then on. Does that answer your question?
It does. I think I've completely missed what an executive summary is.
I can share her screen again. But basically, an executive summary is like a one slide at the very, very front of your case competition presentation. And what that basically does is, as Ha said before, give a high-level summary of all of the things that you're going to talk about, as well as introduce like the context and like the reason why you are doing the thing in the first place. So as like a meta example, our executive summary for our presentation today was basically like, what are we doing here? Why are we here? This is why. And what are we going to do? This is what are we going to do? This is what we're going to do. So if you think about your case comp, maybe it's you quickly reiterate the situation or like the problem of the case. So you might say like, this population has X health something something, and then we propose like 3 recommendations, 1, 2, 3, and then you give like a high level summary of what your 3 recommendations are. Mm-hmm. Or maybe you'd have, we've identified this problem and today we'll present 2 strategies, and then you have problem and then 2 strategies. So it's basically like the 1-page summary if I were to take this away, and this is kind of what I'd remember or what I'd take away from the whole slide, if that makes sense. Okay. So yeah, and it's fine to just title it executive summary because it's kind of like a standard consulting type slide to just title it that way. And then as Ha said before, when your like story and persuasion does begin, that's when you should use like the statement type title on your slides. Does that make more sense?
It does, thank you.
Cool.
Is there anyone else that would like to ask a question? Or
I can just wrap up now. So thanks so much, everyone. Again, Haas, Joe and Cherry, and all our participants today for coming along. This has been a really fantastic workshop, and I'm sure everyone has gotten a lot out of it. A gentle reminder to our participants that registrations close this Friday, 27th of August, and submissions are due Sunday, the 5th of September. Thank you, everyone, and we'll see you soon.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks, guys.